good.
Hey there. So, Zach Woods, star of Silicon Valley. It's great to talk to you again. Me, Charles Bright, and Ralph Galvan. We did this interview about a year ago, and we had such a blast, we had to do it again. Um, so, what I'm wondering now is so Silicon Valley is having this amazing run right now. Is there any difference in shooting, in what it was shooting this past season, season three, than there has been in the past? Like, is there more pressure on it, on the writers and on the performers, given all the critical lauds that you've received over the past 2 years?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a little different. I actually think it feels like less pressure in a way because when you're a freshman show, is that a phrase? Freshman show? Do people say that? When you're a freshman show, that feels like enormous pressure because you're sort of dancing for your life a little bit. You know, who knows if the show will be popular or get picked up. Second season, you're trying to establish that it wasn't just a fluke, that you actually know what you're doing. But by the third season, the sort of imminent threat of cancellation or abject failure isn't looming quite as conspicuously. And so I actually think you can relax a little bit. I mean, obviously you want the show to live up to people's expectations and hopefully, surpass them in some ways. But the fact that you don't have survival angst anymore frees you up to then be more playful, take more chances, experiment more. And also I think you're more settled into the voices of the characters and the voices of the show. You have a better intuition about what will work for the show or not work for the show. And so I actually think it like streamlines the whole, I don't know if it streamlines, but the process improves, I think, from season to season so far. I mean, maybe next season we'll all be like jaded and full of ennui and just smoking silently while looking at our cell phones. But for the time being, it feels actually more relaxed, which is nice. Long answer.
Do you guys like? Okay, so we're midway through at this point through the third season, and I feel like I'm a huge fan of the show, but I feel like I've been watching Empire because there's so much drama that goes into Silicon Valley. It's like there's one thing that goes really well, and then 2 seconds later, something gets messed up, or when Jack Barker came in, there's a whole box issue. I mean, there's just so much that you just want to. Why are you guys torturing each other so much? Do you guys ever get scripts and then just throw them and just be like, you know what, this is way too much, guys. Come on.
Well, it's funny, like, there's that episode where it's the Skunk Works, where we have this whole plan to do this subterranean mission where we're going to pursue our own vision of what Pied Piper should be while working at the sort of corporatized Pied Piper that's run by Jack Barker, and then it all blows up immediately. Like, I make a graphic sex joke that's unexpected. Richard trips. We spill secret documents, and it all is, a catastrophic failure right away. And that was one where I read it where I was like, that episode has so much momentum. It feels like, oh my God, here we go. We're at the launch of some clandestine mission, and then immediately it's this total faceplant. That was when we were at the end of it. I was like, I thought it was so ballsy of the writers. Like, I thought it was such a cool idea to set all that in motion and then just immediately blow it up. But I felt for the guys. I don't know. It's interesting. I think it's something I can sort of relate to, especially being from the comedy community. I think there's a lot of people in Hollywood who are really talented, have a lot of vision, like very inspired, but for whatever reason, because of limits in their circumstances or just personal limitations, they just can't. It's so hard. The road is so hard, even though they're so well equipped. So the sort of endless gauntlet of setbacks for the guys it's not hard to empathize, especially if you work in an industry like the entertainment industry where there's, you see and experience the same thing a lot.
And one of the great things of this season so far, we're only 5 episodes in, halfway through, but the presence of Stephen Tobolowsky for those first 4 episodes was fantastic. He's one of my favorite character actors. I've seen him, you've seen him do so many things. I'm wondering, what was it like having him on the set? Was it just like all like right from the get-go? Did everything just sort of click with him on set?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was really inspired casting because you could have cast that. The writers could have cast that part as sort of a type A, lantern-jawed, the sort of dickhead you expect in that role. But by casting Stephen Tobolowsky, who's a little bit softer, a little bit stranger, a little less domineering, at least initially, it sort of sets the audience a little bit off balance, I think, in a way that's good. On set, it was fun. He's an interesting guy. Like, he has all these crazy stories, and he's got that like folksy Stephen Tobolowsky way of telling a story, and you're like enthralled. I mean, he's hypnotic. It's almost like Clinton-esque, I think.
Do you guys all just have? I mean, I can imagine. I imagine the set is just probably an incredible place to be. Do you guys just all bust up? I mean, do you guys ever just break out of character just because something is so ridiculously funny on the show?
Yes, there's a lot of that, but unfortunately, often it's because something is so stupid. It's not like, for whatever reason, sometimes something will start to strike us as funny, and then we can't stop laughing, even though it's not like a great comedic moment. I'm trying to think of an example. It happens all the time in the crew. Like, God bless our crew because they're so patient with us. Like, when we get into one of these awful spirals, they're just like stoically weather our moronism. Is moronism a word?
It is now.
It is now. So yeah, I'm trying to think. Like, well, Thomas has this story. He tells about they were shooting a scene with a kid, but because of the labor laws and stuff, the kid couldn't be there when they turned around to shoot the other side of it. So they had a stand-in, and instead of the kid, it was this little old lady, very short little old lady, who the line was, "Daddy, I don't want to go to bed." So they just watched this little old lady protesting that she didn't want to go to bed, and they said they couldn't. They ruined it. She had to leave. They couldn't finish the take because every time Thomas would look over and see this little lady go, "Daddy, I don't want to go to bed," he just couldn't keep his shit together. So that kind of thing happened.
One of the things that was really funny last time we spoke was we heard about some of the lines that you improv that actually made it to the show, and I know I saw an interview that you don't actually watch the show. So I was just wondering, we did. Jared is interesting because you just sort of every episode's just a little bit more information about him. And this past week we found out that Jared's father is a militiaman in the Ozarks. Apparently, was that improvised or was that actually in the script?
Yeah, no, that was improvised. For years now, I've been trying to like outfit Jared with this like tragically sad backstory that he's completely unfazed by. Like, in my head, there's been different permutations of it. Some where his parents are dead, some where his father's evidently abandoned the family to go be in a militia. But yeah, I keep it for every season now. I've done these long improvised bits about his past, and they've never made it in. I think this season's the first time some of that stuff starts to sneak in. Because I just think it's funny. I'm just so fascinated by people. I mean, one of the reasons I really love playing Jared, and I love Jared, is there are those people who are just so heroically resilient, bizarrely resilient, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, for me, Zach, I'll collapse if I get an email that like hurts my feelings a little bit. I'm done for the day. But Jared, I think, can withstand pretty much anything and come out just being like, okay, well, what's the solution? Just positive. And so sort of one of the games I like to play with myself and with the other actors when we're shooting is to just make his story as fucked up and sad and strange as possible while trying to credibly maintain his positive worldview around all of that tragedy.
Which is kind of weird because didn't you say that you based your character off of your mother a little bit?
Not that part. But coincidentally, my grandfather is pretty heavily involved in libertarian militias. No, my mother, the part that I base on my mother is that it's self-abnegating, that Jared is self-sacrificing and loving and sort of maternal I'm sorry, I forgot to drop my phone. That part's based on my mom. The parade of horrors that is Jared's past is not based on my mom.
Do you have another one, Ralph?
Yeah, well, I guess more on the improv side. So I know, when you're doing one of your improv shows, you kind of can get. I think we talked about it last time too, where you have the audience and you've got the reaction, so it juices you up more. When you're on set and you have just different takes, and there are points where you're out of the shot or out of the scene for hours at a time, is it difficult to kind of have that same kind of fire that you do when you're doing an improv show, or are you able to still kind of hone that back in to get into the Jared character?
That's an interesting question. I think you're fueled by different things. I think when you do an improv show, like you said, sharing that moment with all the people in the room and all the people on stage, that's your sort of engine. But on the show, I think you're fueled by other things, because sometimes it's 6 in the morning and you're not on camera and you're just there to support the other person, And that's where being in an ensemble cast is so wonderful, because you sort of get your juice from wanting to prop up the other people, because they do it for you, It's probably the most supportive group of people I've ever worked with, where everyone will pitch each other jokes. If one of us is feeling bad, I've had the experience on set where maybe I'll be in some sort of a funk, TJ will come over, or Thomas, or like joke around with me and get me feeling better, and we all do that for each other at different points. So I think there's less of the voltage of a live audience, but there's a lot of, at the risk of sounding like cheesy, but I think there's a lot of love for the characters, for the show, and for each other, and that's when you start to feel like you're dragging ass. That's when you can sort of be like, well, this is important. That's what, for me, I'll be like, oh, well, I love these guys, I love this show, I love these characters, and sometimes it takes a little bit more will. It's less automatic than an improv show, but it's usually pretty available. It's not. I'm giving very long answers, but I guess what I want to say is it's not lost on me how enormously fortunate I am to get to be on a show like this with people who I admire so much. It's the probability of that happening for an actor is so infinitesimally small, and so it feels like an enormous gift. And so if you ever start to feel sort of cavalier about it, or treat it like drudgery, 10 alarms go off in my head where I'm like, wait a second, what are you, fucking crazy? This is this is one of the greatest things that's ever happened in your life. Don't phone it in.
One other thing that I think is really interesting is, we've seen you in so many things, and we just recently saw you on The Good Wife for the last season. It was nice that your character came back for one last sort of hurrah in the last season of the show. And I always just it was you, Juliana Margulies, the woman who played Luca.
Right.
I can't remember her name. What's
Cush Jumbo.
That's right. And also, the woman who plays the Justice of the Peace was on House of Cards. She's the Secretary of State on House of Cards. What's that like being on that show? Do you bring any of the same sort of qualities, a little bit of improvisation into that role as well?
Well, that's interesting. That I've never done a show like that before. So when I go on the set of a comedy, I typically, I've done enough of it now where I'm like, okay, I'll improvise, I'll find it, I'll make it my own in some way. And I'm fairly confident doing that, and confident knowing that I'm not going to waste everybody's time. Because in past working experiences, people have been appreciative of that. With drama, there were times I would want to improvise, but I'd be like, I don't know, like, do they do that here? And I felt like it felt, I didn't want to ask. So I did a little bit here and there, but not much. That's a tightly scripted show. A couple episodes back, I was doing a scene with Nathan Lane, and I adore Nathan Lane, and there's just sort of a playful vibe on set, and during that, I improvised some stuff that I don't know if it made it in or not, but no, it's mostly just scripted.
Now, I know you don't really like watching yourself, as you just mentioned earlier, but did you at least watch yourself on Spy just so you could see your throat kind of dissolve, see how that all came about?
I saw part of it because I had to do ADR. Then that's unavoidable. You have to watch yourself when you do that. So I saw that part. My mother has a neck injury phobia, so that scene, seeing her own child's neck dematerialize, it's like Paul Feig basically filmed my mother's nightmare. So I told her never to see it. But yeah, I saw some of that. I don't know if I ever actually saw my neck disappear. Oh, yes, I did. Now I remember. Yeah, I did. It's a weird thing to watch your own death.
I would imagine so. And it's a weird thing that everything is tying back to your mother in one way or another.
God, do I sound like Norman Bates? Jesus. It's true. I don't know. Yeah, I'm tight with my parents. I do find myself telling a lot of stories like, well, one time when my dad worked at a prison, it's like, what are we doing? Like, don't I have my own stories?
Well, on the set itself, I mean, how have you guys just become? I mean, it's been 3 years now that you guys have been doing this. You're on the third season. Is it just almost become like a brotherhood? All of these guys that you share so much time and so many scenes with.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think many people in their lives have like close friends or romantic partners. It's a different kind of intimacy. It's like very specific, like working together. I mean, I definitely consider those guys my friends, but there's also something. I think it's one of the great treats about working in this business, which is that it's kind of a fast track. If the ingredients are right, working on a show together can really be a fast track to real intimacy in a way, or like real deep friendship fast. I think because it's vulnerable. You're performing together. You're going through a lot of external stuff together. Around the success of the show or not success of the show. So yeah, I feel so. It's like an ancillary benefit of being an actor that you get these like fast-tracked friendships that are also hopefully fruitful creatively. I think our friendship probably helps the show, and the show helps our friendship. It feels weird to talk about your friendship so much in an interview.
But it really does show in just how everything just sort of gels with that show. One thing that I always think is really interesting is, in more recent episodes, it feels like Jared has kind of gotten, he hasn't gotten shit on repeatedly as much as before. And I was wondering if you could think of like one sort of scenario that would be a win for Jared, like a high point for him. What do you think that would be?
Well, it's funny you say that. I mean, the way I think about Jared is like that when he worked at, I don't know if we talked about this last time, but like when he worked at Hooli, I think of him as like a puppet. It's like Pinocchio, like he's a puppet when he works at Hooli, and then he sees Richard Hendricks and he becomes like a real boy, and he's like realizing that he's got all this life that he didn't know about. And I think then, season to season, he gets more and more comfortable being like a full human being with the guys, and the guys sort of accept him more and more. I mean, that's just my private little trajectory. I'm not sure how much that's, in the show. But for this season, yeah, he gets less outright abuse, which is nice for Jared. And if you want to see a win for Jared, I think watch the next episode. There's a good win for Jared, sort of a surprising win for Jared in that episode. But in terms of what Jared's fantasy for himself would be, I don't think he has them. I think all of his daydreams are about other people having good days. Like I think his favorite day would be like, you know, bringing breakfast in bed to Richard, and then you know, whatever, taking Guilfoyle to Burke Williams.
You guys have had, I mean, obviously all of this has worked. I mean, you guys have been on a heck of a run. You know, you guys won AFI TV Program of the Year. You have won a Critics' Choice for Comedy Series, Satellite Award for Comedy Series. This year, you guys were nominated in all three guilds: the PGA, the DGA, and the WGA. All of this award attention has, and not just that, but just being on a show that's so successful, has it changed your life professionally versus what it was even last year in season 2? Do you see more, you know, are you, I mean, they were just in Spy. I know you've done a few other of his films as well, director Paul Feig. Are things just like, are things just great right now for you?
Yeah, it's great to be honest. I mean, I've definitely changed. I scream at my manager's assistants a lot more, and I've been doing a lot of eating a lot of cocaine-topped sushi and sashimi.
Sushi, that's where we go good, hon.
No, has my life changed? Yeah, I get more opportunities than I used to. That part's wonderful. One thing that's really nice is people are extremely appreciative of the show on the street in a way that's more nice than invasive. It's people are really lovely about it. Yeah, it's not lost on me that this is like a good, fun time, and you just meet interesting people. Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's weird, you know, when it still feels like my life the same as it did before. It's not like it's not like transformative, but it's fun. It's really great. I wish I had a more interesting answer, but yeah, it feels different.
And I just another great bit of Jared that came through last week. I don't know if you knew that this made it in, but that Jared does not have his actual birth certificate. Because he's not able to get it from Child Protective Services.
Really? That made it in?
That made it in, yes.
Oh, cool.
Yes.
That's funny. Yeah, again, I feel like, yeah, he probably went from like, I think he spent a tremendous amount of time in the foster care system. In my mind, he's had a lot of foster parents. And I like that also that he'd be tied up with bureaucratic red tape in trying to get his own birth certificate. I mean, his name isn't his name. Like, his name is Donald, but everyone calls him Jared. I like the idea that he's a man without a name, without a birth certificate, that he's just basically what other people have told him he has to be. And he's okay with that because he knows who he is deep down.
Do you enjoy, like, seeing sort of, like, because I see sort of, like, this season more than any, I see this parallel between what we're finding out about Jared and also with the other character Big Head, who just sort of fails upward, you know, and whatever, and this sort of this common bond that they have is whatever, you know, hits them, whatever they encounter, it's always just part of the flow for them, you know. They just weather it the best they can, you know. With Big Head, it seems like it's more, I guess, just ignorance or idiocy. You don't know.
I think Big Head as a character is really developed wonderfully. Like that thing of his like sort of hapless, like being there, Peter Sellers thing, like just like he doesn't know what's happening. He's just sort of borne along by the forces of fate without any real intervention, and somehow manages. And, you know, that I think also reminds me of Hollywood. Like there are so many people who are so talented and have such strong vision who have, for whatever reason, it's such a rocky climb for them. And then there's also some people who just seem like the most uncomplicated, not necessarily even the most inspired, but for whatever reason, something about them, they've been singled out to be, you know, for ascent. And so I love that Big Head's like this nice but totally, totally vacant guy. Yeah, I think in Jared's case, it's like, I think in Jared's case, he's impervious to emotional wounds. I think Big Head is somehow like bulletproof in terms of his fate or something.
So, if the Emmys do justice and you're nominated for supporting actor in a comedy series, you have to submit one Jared episode of the season to Emmy voters. Probably pretty hard because you haven't watched them. But do you have any? I know you said the next one is a big win for Jared. Would that maybe be the one that you'd probably send in, or is there one from earlier in the season that maybe you would do?
Oh, I don't know. It's. I don't think next episode's a huge episode, like story-wise for Jared. There's just like a fun win for him. But in terms of which episode to submit for Emmys, I'd have to ask people because I'd probably ask like Alec Berg and Mike Judge, the guys who run the show, because I don't know. There's later in the season there's some interesting like emotional stuff that I think was fun to do and hopefully also funny. Yeah, so it might be later season stuff that I would gravitate towards. But I'd have to ask.
I definitely would just for the Django comment alone, and again, I said this last time. It's not just the lines; it's the way you say them, and like when you go, "Yes, I am busting your balls." It's just like the most wonderful thing on the planet.
Thank you. That's part of that. In my head, that's like part of the Pinocchio thing, where he's like, "Oh, I can make jokes." Like he's like discovered a new dimension of being a human being.
Well, it's like last year with the Bro app. It's like, no, he hurt this bro.
Yeah. Anytime Jared tries to join in young male culture, I think it ends poorly, but he enjoys it.
So, Ralph, do you have any more?
Good. I just want you to take out the tenant at some point.
Take out the. Oh yeah, Ludwig.
That his name is Ludwig.
So infuriating.
I know it really is.
Oh god, because here's the thing: like if someone's an asshole and they're just an asshole, that's fine. But if someone's an asshole behind the smoke screen of like hippie feel-good stuff, it is so enraging. There was one we did. I don't think that made it into the episode, but there was one where after we had the whole conversation, he shuts the door in my face, and then I just went up to the door and whispered all of the things to the closed door that I'd wanted to say to him because Jared's so non-confrontational. But because I think it was a natural impulse as an actor, because just looking at that guy with his like, his like oozy hippie energy just lit an unquenchable fire in my chest.
Well, we cannot thank you enough for sitting down and talking with us again. It's always a blast to hear from you, and we wish you all the best with the rest of this season and whatever may happen with award season later on.
Thanks a lot, and thanks for watching the show, and thanks for asking such good questions.